As you know, gastric cancer really has needed more effective and really targeted therapies based on the biology of the disease, though chemotherapy, I think, has contributed to the outcome of patients, the benefit. We really want to think forward and build off of our growing understanding of biology. And one thing we know about gastric cancer is that there's clearly a subtype, at least, that should respond to checkpoint inhibitors. And I had the privilege of being involved in a prior study, KEYNOTE-59, which looked at Pembrolizumab in third or later lines of therapy, finding activity for Pembrolizumab as a single agent for patients with refractory metastatic gastric and gastroesophageal junction adenocarcinoma. So we then subsequently tried to look at it in earlier lines of therapy, I should say. KEYNOTE-61 was a randomized trial in which patients who had failed first-line chemotherapy were randomized to one of two second-line therapies, single-agent Paclitaxel, which is an accepted second-line approach, or single-agent Pembrolizumab, with the testing the hypothesis of whether Pembrolizumab would improve the outcome beyond Paclitaxel alone. And the pre-designed study endpoint was overall survival and progression-free survival in patients who were PD-L1 positive with a CPS score of 1% or higher. And what we had the ability to present two aspects of the study. One was a longer follow-up of the overall main effect, which will be appearing at ASCO. And what we found was that there is clearly a numerical improvement in overall survival for patients who received Pembrolizumab compared to Paclitaxel in the individuals who are at CPS 1 or higher. But it did not quite achieve statistical significance. In fact, the hazard ratio, as I recollect, was actually quite close. It was, sorry, I'm just rechecking, 0.81, and the upper limit confidence was 1.00. So certainly very close to statistical significance in terms of improvement of Pembrolizumab compared to Paclitaxel for those patients. Moreover, we found that the improvement in survival for Pembrolizumab over Paclitaxel increased with increasing levels of PD-L1 expression, such that for the individuals who had a CPS score of 5 or higher, the hazard ratio was 0.72, and for those who had a CPS score of 10 or higher, the hazard ratio was 0.69. We also saw a trend towards improved response rates for Pembrolizumab over Paclitaxel with increasing PD-L1 expression. And then lastly, the toxicity profile was clearly superior for Pembrolizumab as compared to chemotherapy, which is no surprise. So, I think what the study suggests is really a trend towards improved survival for using Pembrolizumab, checkpoint inhibitor monotherapy, as compared to chemotherapy in individuals with PD-L1 positive gastric cancer who are receiving second-line therapy, although it did not quite achieve statistical significance. We were very fortunate to get support from the sponsor to also do whole exome sequencing on the patients in the study. And we actually conducted whole exome sequencing on quite a few. And we're still, I think, leveraging the data because obviously it provides an abundant data on the sort of genetic events in these patients and to look at whether those events predict outcome, whether they predict who is more likely to respond to one therapy or another. But one of our primary hypotheses in the study was to look at tumor mutational burden, because as you may be aware, there's a growing body of evidence that tumors with higher mutational burden are more likely to respond to checkpoint inhibition. And what we found was exactly that. That is, in the subset of individuals who, in the whole exome sequence, had more than 175 mutations per tumor sample, there really is a dramatic improvement in survival if you get pembrolizumab as compared to paclitaxel. Moreover, increasing tumor mutational burden predicts a better response from pembrolizumab. In contrast, and perhaps to no surprise, tumor mutational burden does not predict whether you benefit or not from the chemotherapy paclitaxel. The other thing I'll point out is that the prediction value of tumor mutational burden in this setting of pembrolizumab for gastric cancer, the predictive value of mutational burden is independent of PD-L1 expression. Namely, if you conduct a multivariate model, you put both mutational burden and PD-L1 expression in the same model, tumor mutational burden still predicts. So its prediction is even beyond knowing what the PD-L1 expression is. So we really think that this could be part of the potential model for determining patients who really should get pembrolizumab for gastric cancer. And there are efforts underway now, looking certainly in the US with the Food and Drug Administration, about reviewing the value of pembrolizumab determined by assessments of tumor mutational burden. So we think that this further provides guidance on the benefit of this drug in stomach cancer.